What if I told you that every confusing relationship you've ever been in, every "what are we" conversation you've avoided, and every time you wondered why the spark just disappeared, could all be explained by three simple words? And no, those three words aren't "I love you." They're intimacy, passion, and commitment. Look, if you're dating in 2026, you already know it's a mess out there. One day, someone's texting you good morning. The next, they're breadcrumbing you with a random meme at 2 a.m. You're going on dates that feel like job interviews where everyone's doing this thing called hot take dating, throwing out their political views before you've even ordered appetizers. And don't even get me started on situationships where you're basically in a relationship but nobody wants to call it that because, labels are scary. But here's what nobody's telling you. All of this chaos, all of this confusion, it actually makes perfect sense when you understand the psychology behind love. And that's exactly what we're diving into today. Back in 1986, a psychologist named Robert Sternberg was looking at relationships and realized something fascinating. Love isn't just one thing. It's not this magical feeling that either exists or doesn't. Instead, Sternberg discovered that love is actually made up of three distinct components, and depending on which ones you have, you get completely different types of relationships. He called it the triangular theory of love, and honestly, once you understand it, you'll never look at dating the same way again. So let's break down these three components, and I promise we'll keep it simple. First up is intimacy. Now, when most people hear intimacy, they think physical stuff, right? But that's not what psychologists mean. Intimacy is about emotional closeness. It's feeling connected to someone, being able to share your thoughts and fears without judgment. It's when you can ugly cry in front of someone and they don't run away. It's late-night conversations where you actually talk about real things, not just what Netflix show you're binge-watching. Intimacy is that warmth, that feeling of truly knowing someone and being known by them. The second component is passion. This one's pretty straightforward. Passion is the spark, the butterflies, the physical attraction that makes your heart race when they walk into a room. It's sexual chemistry, romance, that overwhelming desire to be near someone. Passion is what makes you check your phone every 5 seconds, hoping they texted back. It's that electric feeling when your hands touch. And yes, it's the reason you've stayed up until 3 a.m. having conversations that could have waited until tomorrow. And the third component? Commitment. This is the decision part of love. It's choosing to be with someone and planning a future together. Commitment is saying we're official and actually meaning it. It's deleting the dating apps. It's making plans for next month, next year, maybe even forever. Commitment is the stability, the promise that you're not going anywhere when things get hard. Now here's where it gets really interesting. According to Sternberg, you can have any combination of these three components, and each combination creates a completely different type of love. And when I show you this, so many of your past relationships are suddenly going to make sense. Let's start with what happens when you have none of these three things. That's just called non-love. It's your coworker you say hi to in the elevator, your barista who makes your coffee. There's no intimacy, no passion, no commitment. It's not even really a relationship. But what if you have intimacy alone, just that emotional closeness without passion or commitment? That's called liking, and it's basically a really good friendship. You can talk for hours, you trust them, you feel close, but there's no romantic spark and you're not trying to build a future together. This is your best friend who knows all your secrets.
Now flip that around. What if you have passion but nothing else? Pure physical attraction, intense desire, but no emotional connection, and definitely no commitment. Sternberg called this infatuation, and if you've ever experienced love at first sight or had a crush on someone you barely know, this is it. It's that person you saw across the room and couldn't stop thinking about. The problem with infatuation is it burns bright and fast. There's nothing underneath to keep it going.
Here's one that's super common and kind of sad. Empty love is when you have commitment without intimacy or passion. This happens a lot in long-term relationships that have just died. You're still together, maybe because of kids, money, or just habit, but the emotional connection is gone and so is the spark. You're roommates with paperwork. It can also happen at the beginning of arranged marriages, where people commit first and hope intimacy and passion develop later. Now we're getting to the combinations that actually feel like relationships. Romantic love is when you combine intimacy and passion. You have that deep emotional connection and the physical chemistry. You're crazy about each other. You can talk for hours and there's definitely heat between you, but here's the catch. There's no commitment. And this is where a lot of modern dating lives, especially in your 20s. You're dating someone. It feels amazing, but nobody wants to define the relationship. Sound familiar? Then there's companionate love, which is intimacy plus commitment. This is what happens in many long-term relationships after the passion fades. You deeply care about each other, you're committed to building a life together, but that spark you had in the beginning, it's dimmed or disappeared completely, and honestly, a lot of successful marriages end up here. You're best friends and life partners, but the romance has become Netflix and early bedtimes. There's also something called fatuous love, which is passion plus commitment, but no intimacy. This is like those whirlwind romances where people meet, feel this intense attraction, and get engaged 3 months later without actually knowing each other. It's all intensity and promises, but there's no emotional foundation. These relationships tend to fall apart when reality hits, and you realize you committed to someone you don't actually know. And finally, the Holy Grail: consummate love. This is when you have all three: intimacy, passion, and commitment. You're emotionally connected, physically attracted, and committed to a future together. It's what everyone's chasing. But here's the thing Sternberg warned us about: it's incredibly rare and incredibly hard to maintain. Because even if you achieve it, life happens. Stress, kids, work, routine. Those three components constantly shift, and keeping all three strong requires real effort. So now, let me blow your mind by connecting this to your actual dating life right now in 2026. Let's talk about the situationship epidemic. You know exactly what I'm talking about. You're seeing someone regularly. Maybe you're sleeping together, you have great conversations, you're doing couple things, but nobody's putting a label on it. You're stuck in this weird limbo, asking yourself, what are we? But too scared to actually have that conversation. According to Sternberg's theory, most situationships are romantic love. You've got intimacy, you've got passion, but that third ingredient, commitment, is completely missing. And that's why situationships feel so confusing and frustrating. 2/3 of the love triangle is there, so it feels real, but that missing piece means there's no stability, no security, no future. You're constantly anxious about where you stand because nothing is defined. And here's why people stay in situationships even when they want more. Loss aversion. We hate losing what we already have, even if it's not enough. You think if I bring up commitment, I might lose the intimacy and passion I already have. So you stay quiet, hoping they'll eventually want more, while slowly resenting them for not giving it to you. But here's the truth: if someone wanted to commit to you, they would. The absence of commitment is a choice they're making. Now let's talk about that hot take dating trend that's everywhere right now. People are leading with their values, their politics, their deal breakers right on the first date. And older generations are calling it intense or rude, but psychologically it's actually brilliant. What hot take dating does is test for intimacy early. Instead of wasting months on surface level conversations and then discovering you're incompatible, you're diving deep immediately. You're checking, can we be emotionally real with each other? Do our values align enough to build intimacy? Because here's what research shows us: relationships built on two or more of Sternberg's components last longer than those built on just one. If you're only connecting through passion, it's going to fizzle. But if you establish intimacy early, you've got a foundation that can survive when the butterflies calm down. This is also why clear coding matters so much. That's the 2026 trend where people are being transparent about their intentions from the start. Are you looking for something casual or serious? Because if you want commitment eventually and they don't, you're not even building the same triangle. You're working with different blueprints. And that's okay, but you need to know that up front, not 6 months in when you're already attached. Let's get real about passion for a second, because this is where people get heartbroken. That intense, can't eat, can't sleep, butterflies in your stomach feeling, it doesn't last. And that's not a flaw in your relationship. That's neuroscience. When you first fall for someone, your brain is flooded with dopamine and norepinephrine. These chemicals create that obsessive euphoric state. You literally can't stop thinking about them, but the human brain can't maintain that level of intensity forever. It would be exhausting. So after about 6 months to 2 years, those chemicals decrease and oxytocin takes over. That's the bonding hormone that creates attachment and comfort instead of obsession. This is why so many relationships end around the 2-year mark. The passion component of the triangle naturally decreases, and if you haven't built strong intimacy and commitment, there's nothing left holding the relationship together. The spark was the only thing you had. And this is what nobody tells you. Successful long-term relationships aren't about maintaining that initial intensity. They're about transitioning from passionate love to companionate love, and ideally finding ways to occasionally reignite passion within that stable foundation.
But here's the tricky part. We live in a culture that glorifies passion. Every song, every movie, every Instagram post is about that intense romantic feeling. So when it fades in your relationship, you think something's wrong, you think you've fallen out of love, but actually you're just moving from one type of love to another. The question is whether you've built enough intimacy and commitment to make that transition feel like growth instead of loss. And this brings us to attachment theory, because your attachment style affects how you experience Sternberg's triangle. If you have anxious attachment, you tend to crave intimacy and commitment intensely, sometimes too early. You might push for commitment before intimacy has developed because you need that security. If you have avoidant attachment, commitment terrifies you. You're fine with passion, maybe even okay with some intimacy. But the moment someone wants to define the relationship, you're out. You might sabotage things right when they're getting serious, because deep down you learn that closeness isn't safe.
Understanding this about yourself and your partner changes everything. Because sometimes it's not that you're incompatible, it's that your attachment styles are making you prioritize different components of the triangle at different speeds. Let me give you a super relatable example. Imagine you match with someone on a dating app. The first date is amazing, great conversation, lots of laughs, physical chemistry, that's infatuation starting to bloom. You keep seeing each other. You start sharing deeper things. Maybe you tell them about your complicated relationship with your parents or your career fears. Now you're building intimacy. The passion's still there, you're sleeping together, you feel close. This is romantic love, but weeks turn into months, and you still haven't had the "what are we" conversation. They won't meet your friends. They won't post about you. They change the subject when you mention future plans. That's the commitment component being deliberately withheld. You're stuck in romantic love limbo, and it hurts because you can feel something's missing, even if you can't name it. Or here's another scenario. You've been with someone for 5 years. You live together. You're financially intertwined. You're committed. But the sex has become routine or rare. You don't really talk about anything meaningful anymore. Your conversations are about groceries and whose turn it is to take out the trash. You have commitment and maybe some leftover intimacy from years of history, but the passion is completely gone. That's companionate love, and some couples are perfectly happy there. But if you're not, if you miss the romance, Sternberg's theory tells us passion doesn't just magically return. You have to actively cultivate it. Date nights, trying new things together, breaking routines, because passion, unlike intimacy and commitment, requires novelty and excitement. And here's something fascinating. Different cultures prioritize different components of the triangle. In Western cultures, especially in dating, we tend to start with passion and hope, intimacy and commitment follow. We fall in love and then decide if we want to commit. But in cultures with arranged marriages, it often works in reverse. Commitment comes first, then hopefully intimacy develops and maybe passion follows. And research shows that both paths can lead to happy relationships. There's no one right way to build the triangle. What matters is that all three components eventually develop. So how do you actually use this theory in your real life? First, diagnose where your current relationship or situationship actually stands. Grab a piece of paper and honestly rate each component out of 10. How strong is your emotional intimacy, your physical passion, your commitment level, and crucially, are you and your partner rating them the same? Because mismatched triangles are where most relationship problems come from. You think you're at a 7 for commitment while they're at a 3, that gap is your problem. Second, communicate about what you want your triangle to look like. This is where that clear coding trend becomes essential. You can say, I feel like we have really strong intimacy and passion, but I need more commitment to feel secure. Can we talk about making this official? That's not being needy or pushy. That's being honest about your needs. And if they can't meet you there, that's valuable information. You're incompatible, not because you're flawed, but because you're trying to build different shapes. Third, understand that the triangle will change over time. A healthy relationship doesn't maintain perfect balance forever. Sometimes life gets busy and passion dips. Sometimes commitment wavers when you're going through stress. The goal isn't perfection, it's awareness and effort. When you notice one component sliding, you actively work to strengthen it instead of just hoping it fixes itself. And finally, be honest about what stage of life you're in and what triangle you realistically want. If you're focused on your career and not ready for commitment, own that. Seek out connections that are just passion or passion plus intimacy. Don't lead people on by pretending you want all three components when you only want two. That's where people get hurt. But also, if you do want consummate love, if you're ready for all three components, don't waste time in situationships hoping they'll transform into something more. Seek out people who explicitly want the same triangle you do. Look, the psychology of love isn't about finding some perfect formula or soulmate. It's about understanding that love is complex, multifaceted, and constantly evolving. Sternberg's triangular theory gives us language for what we're feeling. It helps us understand why some relationships feel incomplete, even when they're not technically bad. It shows us that you can love someone but still not be compatible if you want different types of love, and it reminds us that the best relationships, those rare consummate loves, require all three components, and they require work to maintain. So, the next time you're lying awake wondering why your relationship feels off, ask yourself which component is missing. And more importantly, are you brave enough to talk about it? Because that conversation, that what are we moment that everyone avoids, that's not awkward or needy. That's you fighting for all three components of the triangle. That's you refusing to settle for infatuation or empty love when what you really want is something complete. And maybe, just maybe, understanding the psychology behind love will help you stop chasing sparks that burn out and start building triangles that actually last. So here's my question for you. Looking at your current or past relationships, which component of the triangle do you think was missing? Was it intimacy, passion, or commitment? Drop a comment and let's talk about it. And if this video helped you understand your love life a little better, hit that subscribe button because we're diving deep into psychology every single week.